Hey there, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to rip into a Ford C4 transmission. This is a 1968 unit, and it came out of a 1970 Mustang Fastback. So I have a sneaking suspicion as to why this particular transmission is on the bench and not the one that originally was installed from the factory, and it'll make a lot more sense once I get into the barrel of the case and start talking about engineering changes that took place with these transmissions during the 60s and into 1970. So anyway, the story with this thing has been sitting for 10 years. My customer, who's a shop, he's doing a Mustang restoration for a woman who just wants a good, reliable transmission to serve as like an occasional weekend cruiser. She wants to enjoy the Mustang and, you know, just generally maybe take it to shows, have a good time with it. There's not going to be any racing or anything like that. So I'll film the rebuild of this. I don't have any C4 rebuild content on the channel, so this will be a good opportunity to kind of just showcase a basic, reliable stock rebuild. We are going to put a Transgo shift kit in it just to kind of, you know, wake it up a little bit, but nothing crazy. All right, so what I'll do is I'll get a little bit closer and we'll begin. How I'm going to proceed with this is I'm going to take the extension housing bolts on the top side all out. We're going to flip the transmission over, remove the rest of the extension housing, remove the pan and the valve body, and then we're going to do a case air check. Once I'm done with the air check, because I'm curious to see, you know, how the apply circuits, you know, what their sealing integrity is, then at that point we'll start just taking the transmission apart. Hey, socket sizes, 9/16 on your extension housing as well as your pump to bell housing to case bolts, 1/2 inch for your servo cover bolts, 3/4 for your lock nuts for your band adjustment screws, 7/16 for the linkage. This is 1/2 inch, and then you have pan bolts, and they are all 1/2 inch. All right, 3/8 for the speedometer hold down bracket. We still got the transmission mount bolted to the case, or extension housing rather, and I guess it'll be a good example of like why you need to replace the transmission mounts. This one is absolutely destroyed, non-existent. So, all right, now we're gonna flip it over, and it looks like there's some rust. The shop mentioned that this thing's been sitting outside for a long time, so there may be some surface rust inside. The other thing that I noticed was the input shaft does not want to come out. These shafts are basically what I call floating input shaft design, meaning that they are not, you know, secured to anything. You can just take them out. So it's very interesting to see what will happen once we get this pan off and once we get into the barrel of the case. Okay, pan's been off. At some point, bolts are loose. Okay, looks like we have some debris visible. Could be burnt clutch material, could be metal, and like I said, there's definitely some water mixing in with everything else. So get this pan out of the way. All right, these motor or trans mount bolts, looks like 3/4. great shape. Alright, so here we have the valve body. Valve body underwent some design changes. From 1964 to 1966, you had your so-called green dot valve bodies, green dot transmissions, and basically that was in reference to the range shift pattern. So those were a little bit different. You had park, reverse, neutral, and then you had white dot, green dot, and low. And then in 67, they made a switch kind of more toward the conventional pattern, park, reverse, neutral, drive 2 and 1. The reason that they made the switch was people were burning up these transmissions because, you know, they didn't fully get the, you know, the green dot, white dot pattern or what it meant. And in the defense of everybody that did, it's not really intuitive. So Ford came to their senses and decided to switch things up. You can take a late 60s valve body, stick it on an early case. You just have to change the detent, I guess, labeling or indicators in your, you know, inside your vehicle. Okay, these have 8 bolts. Later cases starting in 70 have 9. So 7/16. Alright, don't take any of the other bolts off. They don't need to come off. Alright, and the valve body will come off. Okay, notice here you have a clicker style valve body where the detents are, you know, in the manual valve itself. And in 1970 this changed. They got rid of this. They had an off-board, you know, detent roller, and the manual valve itself was completely different. It was more of a conventional manual valve with a traditional engagement location or 2 spools for engagement, and it did not have the detents. Stupid car alarm. Alright, I'll probably do a separate video on that valve body, and we'll go over, you know, all the nitty-gritty on the history and lay out the valve trains. We'll discuss mods and, you know, other whatnot at that time. Okay, you got your screw-on modulator, green stripe, later model units. That was a press-in or, you know, push-in modulator, and it had a bracket holding it on. Okay, these transmissions are not all that heavy. You know, they're relatively easy to work with. Oh, I got my 1/2-inch socket on there. Should have my 9/16. All right. All right, get that extension housing out of the way. Now we have our governor. Alright, good news is there's no RTV on here. Sometimes I see these come in, they're caked with RTV on the gasket, and it's totally unnecessary. As long as you put the extension housing on correctly and you torque it to spec, you will not have any issues with leaks. Assuming the extension housing end or the case isn't warped or something. Okay, we'll leave the governor in place for now so we can do our air check. I'll go ahead and I'll label all the apply circuits so that you know where they are. We'll reposition the camera, and then we will see to what extent this transmission would have worked if in fact it was installed into a vehicle. Alright, ready to go. We have our circuits labeled, so it's going to be your direct clutch, your forward clutch, converter. These 2 big holes here are going to be for your pump suction and pressure. And then this is going to be your intermediate servo. This is going to be for low reverse, and then you have your governor. Alright, so we'll start with forward clutch, see how it is. Looking for nice strong apply. Okay, that's what we hear. Now direct. Alright, Notice air staying trapped in the circuit. That's great news for a transmission that's been sitting outside in the desert for 10 plus years. Okay, now we'll do intermediate. Good apply and release. Low reverse. And then, this is going to be your to and your from governor. So, when you air check the governor, you want to just make sure you hear movement in the governor valves. Okay, I'm using about 85 psi of air. You don't need any more than 100, but I would have at least 50 minimum. Preferably around 75 to 85 is ideal. So that's the air check. You have a screw-in vacuum modulator. I mean, that'll come off. There's the modulator valve. Ford actually refers to this, I believe, as the throttle valve, but I mean, everybody and their mother knows it as the modulator and modulator valve. So I'm going to go ahead and just start taking it apart as is. We will begin with our servo for intermediate. As you can see, it's under spring tension. So this particular servo was manufactured in 1966. So if you're not familiar with Ford's codification, at least for the legacy stuff, you have these first 4 characters. That's what you're going to pay attention to. The rest of it's not important. Okay, you may see an RF in front of each of these. That just stands for rough foundry. So the first character is going to be a letter. It's going to be either C, D, E, or F, and that corresponds to the decade of production. So in this case, C would equate to 1960s, D is 1970s, E is 1980s, and F is 1990s. The next character is going to indicate the actual year of production. So in this case, it's a 6, meaning 1966. A is going to indicate the application, and it could be Ford, it could be Thunderbird, it could be Ford truck. T is for truck, and so forth. And then P indicates the design office or engineering department within Ford Motor Company that was responsible for designing, developing, and ultimately producing this particular part. So if you notice here on the cover, there is an A. All right, much like the C6, the C4 has different servos, and they are different sizes based on the inner diameter. This smaller diameter here, this is the apply side. Okay, so you have A, B, C. C is going to correspond to the largest servo, I believe, that was installed in any of the Mustangs. They went into the 289 high outputs. And then you have H and R servos available that can be installed into one of these Mustang C4s. They were installed into the full-size cars and trucks. The C4 was basically Ford's medium-duty transmission of its day, where the C6 was the heavy-duty transmission. So even with the introduction of the FMX, the C4 remained a stalwart in Ford's automatic transmission lineup all the way until 1985. Now in 82, this transmission was redesignated to C5, and a whole host of changes went into effect. It had a lock-up torque converter, and it is, drastically different in many respects than the C4s from 1964 to 1981. So vintage-wise, you have 2 vintages in the 60s, the aforementioned green dot style, and then the 1967 through 1969 variants, which were conventional in terms of the valve body. And then you had 1970, which a whole host of engineering changes went into effect in these transmissions through 1981. And then, like I said, the C5s took over. I mean, it's basically the same general architecture, but like I said, significant changes to the valve body, to the torque converter, and other things that make many parts not interchangeable. So, screw-on modulator, green stripe, and then you have your modulator rod, and then of course your gasket. We don't need that. And then you have your modulator valve. Just pay attention to this valve when you're taking it out. You want to make sure it's not dragging on you. You want to inspect it for wear. got a little bit of wear here on the valve. You could sand this up nicely, 800 to 1000 grade, even 1500 grit sandpaper, and you can polish the bore with bench buddies. The main thing is you don't want a valve that's dragging, because then you'll have all kind of problems shifting and whatnot. Alright, let me get this band adjustment screw out of the way, or nut rather. Okay, like I said, 3/4. And it'll just come out. These do have seals, so you'll replace the nut and put a new nut on just like the C6. Alright, I'm going to reposition the camera again so that we can finish the disassembly. Alright, now the governor. Note the position of the governor and orientation on the governor support. You see this rounded off enclosed side here. That's going to go to the rounded portion of the support. And likewise, you have exposed valve that's going to go on the squared off portion. 3/8 on these bolts. Okay, note the output shaft spinning nice and freely, nice and smooth. Tells me nothing's bound up in the case. Alright, and then as far as the oil dam here, unless it's broken or coming apart, you don't really have to replace it or touch it. So just keep those two things in place. There's like a little retainer right here. Have a spiral lock wavy snap ring, if you will. So just check the valving, make sure it's moving. I mean, the air check revealed that there was seemingly no issues with it, but you're going to take this apart, clean it out, put it back together. I mean, they're pretty straightforward devices. Alright, so here's our governor support. We're actually going to remove this once everything is out of the main case. So I'm going to reorient it. And we can take out our low reverse servo. So on these older cases in the 60s, they had the case vent and vent tube at this location. Later models in 70 and up, the vent was up here and it was more of a like kind of a mushroom cap design, more of a traditional vent tube design, or venting design rather. No tube. Alright, 1/2 inch. That was loose. Interesting. As was this. That is most curious. So we had 2 bolts loose. Okay, as far as I know, these servos are all the same, and they're always replaced on overhaul. One thing, at least at the time of this particular filming, it should be noted that parts for the C4s are getting scarce, especially hard parts. But even things like the servo are out of stock in a lot of places, including my local hard part supplier. This is being filmed in July 2024, and they had to back order some. So I found one online on eBay, brand new. So that'll be in, I guess, a little bit later in the week. But be aware that if you're working on C4s and you're new to them, you may encounter supply chain issues. Hard parts, things like the forward and direct drum, they are getting harder and harder to come by, at least good used. So again, make sure you have all of your supply chain risk accounted for, and all of your sources for various parts and components lined up before you start working on your unit. Okay, 3/4 for the intermediate band. Alright, and you have your band strut, or anchor rather. No band struts in these. Okay, this wedge, it goes to the band adjustment screw, and then this strut goes on the other side of the band. I think we said this was 1/2 inch. Alright, my customer's going to be putting a completely different shift linkage setup on this thing, so, and that's 7/16. So none of this will go back on the unit. And this doesn't even look factory to me. This looks like something you'd buy at a hardware store. All right. Alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to see if I can position. Oh yeah, here's your vent tube, take that off. Let's see how I want to do this. As I mentioned, this was stuck, or is stuck. It's not coming out. So, let me put another stand underneath the case. Looks like I'm going to need a block of wood. I'm looking to get, all right, I think I'm good. I'm looking to get that bell off the bench so that when I take it off, it, you know, it's not getting hung up or whatever. All right, 9/16 on the bolts holding the bell and pump to the case. Perhaps used an extension. Could have used an extension there, but I'm simply too lazy to grab it. Okay. There's our bell housing. I want to get this out of the way off the bench. Okay, there's a variety of different bell housings available for these transmissions. You want to make sure you match the bell housing with the engine that you're going to be using. If it's a project car, if it's not like, you know, just putting it back together factory or stock. So just be aware of that. Alright, let me make sure I got everything out of the way, and I'm going to see if I just pry this forward and push the pump out. Alright, we'll get into the pump in a minute. Our gasket. So far I haven't seen any indication that this transmission's been overhauled before. Okay, this is our selective washer. Alright, there's a selective washer in here as well. Alright, so here's our direct drum, forward drum. Let's have a look at the band. Band looks like it's in very good shape. I would never recommend you reuse these bands, but let's just say you're on an extreme budget. This is the area here you want to check. Okay, you want to make sure that there's no excessive wear at the apply points. Okay, check the hardware, you know, your anchor points. Make sure they're not, the rivets are not coming loose or whatever. Like I said, I would never ever recommend anyone reuse their band. So I recommend that you come with a thrust washer kit. It'll have selectives. So you'll have various thicknesses of, as well as replacement thrust washers for all the others that are in the case. Alright. That goes right there on the front planet. It's your ring gear. Okay, it's going to be your forward clutch hub. Let's look at our front planet. Okay, whatever you do, do not give into temptation to shoot a whole bunch of brake cleaner into the pinions and then blow it out with shop air. It's a great way to destroy the pinions and destroy the needle bearings. But otherwise, check your splines, check your journal. You're going to check the captured bearing. You can rebuild these if you need to. Alright, here's our shell. Alright, the shell is considered a hard part. It can wear, especially at the lugs. Okay, this one has a little bit of wear to it, nothing crazy. It's got wear here. So it does have some wear. If you're, if you think that the wear is a little bit, too excessive, then you just simply replace the shell. So take a closer look at it a little bit later. All right, here's your thrust washer for your rear planet. At this point, you can remove your kick down lever. All right, when you go back with these units, and same for the C6, you want to make sure that that lever is installed before you put your front drum complex in, because if you install the drums first, you're never going to get that lever in there. And the snap ring holds the ring gear into position. Of course, I'm not prepared with my pick. Okay, here's your planet. Appears to be in good shape physically. I don't see any play in the pinions. 3-pinion deal. These planets are fairly reliable. Every once in a while you'll see one bad, but it's not like it's a major source of consternation with these units. Alright, let me grab my snap ring pliers. Alright, should be able to see deep into the barrel of the case, so we're going to go ahead and remove that snap ring. I'm going to get access to it. Yeah, it took a little more effort than it should have. Of course, I'm filming, so that's kind of the expectation, I suppose. Okay, so you have your planetary rear thrust washer, and then you have a thrust washer as well for the low reverse drum. So that's going to need to low reverse. It's going to be for your planet. Now it's going to be situated here. Sorry about that. Then you have your front planet thrust washer. There you have it. It's your ring gear, and again, you can separate your hub or your reaction element from the ring gear itself at the snap ring. Just check your teeth, make sure it's good or they're good. Make sure that your splines are not worn. All right. We'll do another check with the output shaft to determine, as we react the ring gear onto the shaft, see if there's excessive play. All right, let's go ahead and spin the case round. All right, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start removing everything else. So we have our oil distributor and our governor support. And basically that's all that's really holding the output shaft into position. So 1/2 inch on all these bolts. So make note of the parking linkage, the arrangement of all the components. I mean, like I said, I'll film the rebuild, so if it's not something you can deal with right now or it's not real visible, you'll see it then. Alright, so what just fell out is our governor filter screen. That's going to go in here, this location. Don't lose it. Alright, then we have 2 thrust spacers that sit in front of the snap ring. Actually, it looks like there's 3 of them. 3, my apologies. 3, not 2. And then we have our snap ring. Okay, we have 3 butt cut style cast steel sealing rings. They appear to be in good shape with just normal wear. And then we'll look at the output shaft in a few minutes. Okay, you have your feed tubes here for your governor, and then you have your support. And then you're going to have your parking gear. Okay, as soon as you remove your distributor, I'm calling it a support. This is the support. This is the oil distributor. As soon as you remove this distributor, the parking gear is going to fall down. So just have a finger on it or something. Alright, so just carefully pry away. Again, you don't want to take a risk on damaging your feed tubes. There we go. Alright, and again, keep a hand there so you can catch your parking gear. Inspect for wear. Okay, you can visually see sealing ring groove wear, but you should not be able to feel it. If you feel it, if the surface is like quote-unquote undulated, that means that this is worn out. You'll have governor pressure issues, so you'll want to replace your oil distributor if that turns out to be the case. Parking gear, check splines. These appear to be in good shape. You have your thrust washer. This is the inboard side. It faces the case. And then obviously check the parking gear structure for any cracks or, fractures, whatever. Common sense stuff really when it comes to some of these, basic components. All right. So let me zoom up on that parking linkage so you can get a better view of it. All right, so pretty simple. You're going to have your return spring here. That keeps the parking pole away from the gear until you actually place it into park. And then it engages the parking gear. So just note how it's orientated. Then you have your pole and your pin. Alright, have the case oriented frontwards now. So we have the low reverse drum, the band, and the band anchor and hardware is still in place. So all you're going to do is just spin your reverse drum clockwise and pull on it. Okay, there's a large bushing inside here that has to be replaced. Okay, check your lugs for wear. And you're going to need to check the band surface. We'll check both band surfaces a little bit more closely when we go through the sub-assemblies. Okay, then you're going to have your low reverse race. Alright, now these rollers are loose, meaning as soon as I take this race out, they're going to go all over the place. Okay, unfortunately there's not a captured assembly like there is in later model transmissions. The C6 is the same way, but the C6 you retro an E40D 4100 rear one-way roller clutch assembly, and you don't reuse the C6 assembly. So again, clockwise. And there goes your rollers. So check your race surface over and check the splines. Make sure that they're in good shape. Make sure that the race is not scored. That one appears to be fine. And then you have the cam that's bolted in. And then you have a thrust washer way at the back of the case. So this is just a cage. The cage itself you keep unless it's worn. So inspect it, make sure it's not cracked, damaged in any way, shape, or form, because you're going to basically buy rollers and springs in a little package. They usually come in a brown envelope, and you're just going to reassemble it. And what I do is I put a boatload of assembly lube in place, and that allows me to keep everything, you know, more or less intact as I'm putting it together, and I have the transmission sitting upright on the bench when I'm doing it. Okay, rollers are going to go all over the place. Don't worry about it. Like I said, I don't reuse this stuff. So, and then you have your band. So if I can zoom in so you can see exactly how all the hardware is arranged. Alright, it's more or less going to be as you see it. So, I apologize, I keep putting this thing close as if I'm not already zoomed in. All right. So again, same deal with the intermediate band. I always replace these, but if you're going to reuse yours, which in most scenarios is perfectly fine because a low reverse band doesn't get a whole lot of wear to it. It's just used in reverse unless you're racing, and it's going to be used in manual low when you're doing your burnouts. But most of these bands are in great shape. Even 50, 60-year-old units, you don't have a lot of wear to them. This particular one looks like it's got a little bit of wear right here where my finger is. So we're going to put a new band in here. It doesn't really matter, but this one overall is in half decent shape. I would say half decent. Okay, and here's our thrust washer. And it doesn't want to come out. Alright, last but not least, you have that bolt-on race. It's up to you if you want to take it out. You really don't need to remove it. It's, unless it's damaged in some way, you can just leave it in there. Alright, last but not least, we have the parking linkage that has to come out. So let me move you a little bit closer so you can see what's going on, and then we will take all that stuff out of there. All right, this nut is going to be 7/8. So easiest thing to do is just grab a breaker bar and break it loose. So make sure I'm on it. Alright, so the manual lever actuator arm is going to be separate from your parking assembly. So parking rod and your lever here, is secured by an E-clip. You don't have to remove the E-clip that's holding the manual lever actuator arm to the parking rod assembly. You just have to remove the E-clip that holds the parking rod assembly to the case through this little anchor pin. Okay, this thing can be tricky, so just be careful, because it'll take a little bit of effort to get it off of here, and then once you do, it will, it wants to fly across the room. All right, there we go. Alright, and then you're going to take your outboard or rear E-clip off of the anchor here so that you can remove the assembly from the case. And like I said, you want to keep track of where it goes once it flies off. So notice you have a little spacer. And then there's your entire assembly. All right, at this point you can just remove your selector shaft. And then you have your selector shaft seal. That just comes out with a small pry bar. Alright, so the main case is empty, other than that cam for the race. Alright, you have a little bit of wear on the case in the back here, you see it? This is usually not consequential. Nothing seals there. The only other thing you have is the bushing. So you replace all the bushings in these transmissions just like any other. Bushing kits are readily available. Like I said, where you'll have some challenges when it comes to supplies and parts is the hard parts themselves, forward and direct drum. Forward drums are currently available from Transtar. I think they're like 65 or 70 bucks. The direct drums, at least as of this filming, are not as readily available on the market. So, eBay, Transparts Warehouse, whatever it takes, transmission parts, Cobra transmissions, they all sell parts for these units, but just depending on what stock is available, then that's going to depend on how quickly you can get what you need. So that's the main case. Let's go ahead and look at the sub-assemblies and then we'll be done. Alright, real quick before I forget, you have an O-ring here. This is going to be your selector shaft assembly. The O-ring is going to go here, and then your kickdown lever is going to go there. The O-ring is going to seal that area between the kickdown lever and the main selector shaft. So O-ring will come in the kit, and you'll be able to replace it then. But it fell out and I didn't mention it, so wanted to do so now before I forgot. Alright, let's take a look at the pump. Which goes here. It's a 2-tab washer, and it goes on the stator. Those are selective, and so they will be used to adjust your front end play. All right, 1/2 inch on these bolts. Alright, so that's our driven gear. There's our working surface. Do you see some scoring? When this thing was on the road, there was a lot of contaminant and fluid. I'm venturing to guess that the fluid was not changed, or at least not changed in the intervals that it should have been. Okay. So this is what you see when you take apart transmission, where the fluid was not changed very often or at all. I mean, the applied elements from what we've looked at so far, the two bands, appear to be in decent shape, but you know, we see a lot of scoring on parts, including the back of the case. So check your gears, make sure that there's no fracturing, no cracking, make sure the teeth are still in good shape. This is assuming you plan on reusing them, which is perfectly fine, by the way. There's no reason that, unless they're damaged, that you shouldn't. One thing you really want to pay attention to with the drive gear is the engagement area for the torque converter. This likes to get worn in a mushroom. Okay, this area right there, and you won't be able to actually put the new torque converter on. Okay, we see some wear in here, pitting. Again, this is all indicative of a transmission was ran either really low on fluid, or, you know, from what I've seen so far, just simply not changed. I'm going to put a new set of gears in here, assuming I can find them. So I don't like the way those look. Okay, run your fingernail across. If you can feel scoring, if your fingernail's getting caught up, you know, hung up on any of these otherwise, you know, visually evident grooves, then you're going to want to replace, or remachine, I should say, the stator. Bushings will be replaced. You know, check your journal surfaces. Okay, you got 4 interlock style cast steel sealing rings. Okay. As far as that stator is concerned, once it's cleaned up, I'll look at it again, but it seems okay. For the body, your main focal point of inspection is going to be the crescent. Okay, if this crescent's worn, then it's going to have to be remachined and oversized gear set put in. If you see wear here, or on the back side, that would tell me that, you know, line pressure or sufficient pressure was likely an issue with the unit when it was on the road. There you have suction and pressure, and then you have your feed circuits. So, and the dirt you see is just coming from the outside. It's filthy. Bushing gets replaced, front seal gets knocked out, replaced. I mean, this pump physically looks okay, visually looks okay. I see some wear visually, but I don't see, or I cannot feel, scoring. So again, I'll look at it once it's clean, but it appears to be okay for now. Alright, let's see what's up with this Ford drum. So here's our itty bitty direct drum. Alright, as you can see here at the base of the Ford drum, you have your number 2 washer, so we'll have to dig that out. And as you can see, this, I don't know what the heck went on here, but see if I can knock it out real quick. Let's see if it'll move at all. Alright, there it goes. Okay, so at the beginning of the video I alluded to why I think this particular transmission is on the bench and not the 1970 version. In 1970, it was a kind of a unique year, 1 year only, where the input shaft had 26 splines on the inboard facing side as well as the torque converter facing side. Okay, 1964 through 69, it was 24 on the converter side, 24 on the drum side. 1970, they increased to 26 each side. In 1971, Ford went back to a 24 spline count on the inboard side of the input shaft. So 26 splines at the converter side, 24 splines on the drum side for those 71 and up transmissions. Alright, so let's take a look at the direct drum real quick, and then we'll inspect the forward drum. Okay, you got 4 frictions, 4 steels. They look in good shape. See a little bit of slippage here. Some slip marks. Slipping in high gear is unfortunately quote-unquote normal for these transmissions. After they get a lot of miles on them, like any other, they just simply wear. The other potential concern is the health of the valve body, particularly the boost valve. And so if that's worn, then when you go to accelerate, you'll have slippage especially in third gear, when you're trying to kick down back into second. So unknown as far as the amount of miles on this unit, but we do see some slip marks. I always replace the steels. I never reuse the steels on these C4s. A lot of slipping there on the backing plate, so this will have to be prepped, or I may even just replace it. Alright, so you have your piston and you have your spring set up. Later, return spring assemblies for the drum had one long spring or one large spring. So let me go to the foot press. I'll take this out and then we'll look at the piston. Alright, one thing you may have noticed is that not all 4 locking tabs were engaged on the snap ring. So when you go back with it, you always want to make sure that they are. And then make sure none of your springs are missing. Okay, just check your piston, make sure it's not, broken or fractured, cracked. I mean, it looks like we got something right there, it's chipped. And, that's basically it. You want to check your bleeder ball. You want to make sure those are always working. You should be able to hear it move. If you can't, shoot brake cleaner in there. And, if it's still not making noise after that, then at that point, you may want to replace the piston. Alright, so check your band surface. Shouldn't have put this piston in here. Okay, best way to do this, other than a visual inspection, is just to take a straight edge and a flashlight. Any straight edge will do. And what you're checking for is a light coming from underneath. Alright, do the best you can to hold it steady. I'm doing this in kind of an awkward angle, but based on what I've seen both on the band as well as on the drum here, the surface appears to be in good shape. No signs of warpage. I'll check it more thoroughly off camera, but that's how you do it. All right, sorry for the reach across. Okay, forward. I know my glove is coming apart. All right, so here you're gonna have a Belleville plate. You wanna replace those. So forward ply plate looks good. Frictions appear to be in good shape. They got 5 and 5. And then here is your apply plate. Okay, to get the snap ring out here is tricky. And it's tricky because there's a combination of a lot of spring tension on it and not a lot of space to work with. So what I try to do is I try to get my straight pick in here, pry this forward just enough to get a flat blade screwdriver, you know, something real small, in behind it, and in between the two of them, pry it loose and then grab it. So we'll see how that works. And you'll notice there's a gap here between the Belleville plate and the edge of the drum. That's where the pick likes to get caught as you're trying to pry it out. So you see it's caught, and then that allows the snap ring to kind of reset itself in the groove. So, you know, it's kind of a pain in the ass. In fact, let me get just 2 straight picks, and it might be a little bit easier. I'll straighten a 45-degree angle pick. There we go. And then just work it out all the way around. Note the difference between the clutch snap ring and the Belleville plate snap ring. It has a roughly 45 or 50 degree angle here at the end, whereas the clutch snap ring is squared off. Okay, this you're gonna keep, and this is gonna get tossed. Well, these things have been sitting in here forever, so I don't want to come out. Okay, same deal with your leader. Make sure it's working. So this was made in 1964. And then forward and direct drum, check your sealing surfaces, inside and out. There's also a seal here on the drum. Grab the direct drum again. I should have mentioned that. The direct drum also has a seal. So check surfaces. Make sure that you don't have any unusual wear, excessive scoring. On the direct drum, you also want to check your sealing ring groove area here where the pump goes. And again, visual wear is fine, physical wear is not. So place the drum if you feel physical wear. Here's the very base of the stator. Your other 2 sealing rings for your forward clutch apply. And your number 2 thrust washer. And of course, doesn't want to come out. So let's see how thick these are. This looks like it's going to be 74 thousandths. This is going to be 57 thousandths. Okay, this is the area that I want to pay real close attention to, because that input shaft was stuck in there. It was stuck pretty good. So you can tell the difference between the converter side and the inboard side. This is actually the inboard side. This is the converter side. The converter side is going to have more wear to it. So you see all the wear there. This thing would focus. Okay, this is the converter side. This is the drum side. So you want to make sure that the fit is still good. And you want to make sure the splines are not twisted. This appears to be okay. I mean, I say that with, a little bit of hesitation, just simply because you don't really know until everything's cleaned off. Then you can inspect it again. I'm probably going to take a magnifying glass and go over these splines, and same with the ones on the shaft. This is where this thrust washer goes, and then of course you have your direct drum. So for now, this drum appears to be okay. Appears to be okay. Alright, one last thing I want to check is the band surface on the lower first drum. So band surface. Sorry for all the noise. So we're going to perform the same test that we did on the direct drum. Alright, I don't see any light coming through. Check it in multiple spots, multiple points along the drum surface. But preliminary examination reveals no obvious defects or areas of concern, or reason to be concerned, I should say. Okay, that is the teardown. Overall, the transmission appears to be in good shape. I was a little concerned about that input shaft and possibly being either rusted or seized, or somehow either the splines on the shaft of the drum damaged, the drum possibly cracked, but that turns out not to be the case. We do have some slippage shown in the direct clutch pack. In high gear, again, for a transmission with whatever amount of miles on it, if it's any appreciable amount at all, that's not unheard of. I mean, could point to some line pressure deficiencies within the unit when this thing was on the road. But anyway, we still have to take apart the valve body, we still have to examine the governor, but everything else appears to be fine. That's one thing I forgot to do, and I'll do it now. Let's check our ring gear. Okay, that appears to be fine. Every once in a while you'll see splines that are real worn, and it will have a pretty pronounced amount of play, and you obviously don't want that. And you can do the same the front planet. Again, that feels real nice. I mean, you could barely hear anything. Get this thrust washer off of there. Okay, nice and tight, that's what you want. All right, like I said, this thing will get a complete overhaul: bushings, clutches, steels, paper, rubber, modulator, new low roller kit. Probably going to do pump gears, transgo shift kit in the valve body, bands. And I asked him if he wanted to do an upgraded servo. He actually declined, so we're just going to put the A servo back in with new seals. And that's basically it. Mentioned thrust washer kit, so probably do possibly a selective if we need to, if we're not able to achieve the end play that we need to. All right, as always, thanks so much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you want to see anything specific to the C4s, go ahead and leave it in the comments, and I will try to prioritize it as soon as I can. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day or evening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.